Okay, hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me for this session. Okay, so now we are uh, continue our learning in managerial economic. We are focusing on chapter number 5. Okay, the production process and cost. The production process and cost. So for this chapter, we will discuss about how that we can explain an alternative way of measuring the productivity of input. Yeah, calculate the input demand and cost maximizing, cost minimizing. Yeah? So in production, we try to minimize the cost of input and use isoquant analysis to illustrate optimal input substitution. And we will calculate a cost function from a production function and explain how economic costs differ from accounting costs. And then we will explain the difference between the economic relevance of fixed costs, sunk costs, variable costs, and marginal costs. And we will calculate average and marginal cost from algebraic or tabular cost data and illustrate the relationship between average and marginal cost. Okay, in this chapter we will distinguish as well between short run and long run production decisions and illustrate their impact on cost and economies of scale. And last but not least, of course, we will discuss in conclusion whether multiple output production process exhibit economies of scope or cost complementaries and explain their significance for managerial decision. Yeah. So to achieve our learning objective that uh, we have explained just now, we will see of this overview. Okay, production analysis in terms of total product, marginal product, average product, and the isoquant, isocost, cost minimization. So we will do a production analysis through this subtopic, and we will do cost analysis through total cost, variable cost, fixed cost, okay, cubic cost function and cost relations. And then we will discuss multi-product cost function. Okay. So company as well as non-profit organization are in the business of producing goods or providing services, and their successful operation require manager to optimally choose and quantify and types of input to use in production process. So that's the successful operation of a consulting business, for instance, require getting the right quantity and mix of employees and optimally substituting among these and other input as wages and other input price changes. Okay, so this chapter provide the economic foundation needed to succeed in managerial position such as production and pricing management. So the concept of production and cost presented are also important in their own right, as they serve as the basic building block for business areas that include human resources, operations, managerial, accounting, and strategic management. So we will begin by describing the technology available for producing output. So technology summarizes the feasible means of converting raw input such as steel, labor, and machinery into an output such as an automobile. So technology effectively summarizes engineering know-how and managerial decisions such as those concerning expenditure on research and development can affect the available technology. So in this chapter, we will see how a manager can exploit an existing technology to its greatest potential. So in subsequent chapters, we will analyze the decision to improve a technology. So to begin our analysis, let us consider a production process that utilize two input, capital and labor, to produce output. Capital and labor. Okay. So we will let's K denote the quantity of capital. K denote the quantity of capital. L the quantity of labor, and Q the level of output produced in the production process. So although we call the input capital and labor, the general ideas presented here are valid for any two input. Okay. However, most production processes involve machine of some sort, referred to by economists as a capital, and people or labor in this terminology will serve to solidify the basic idea. So the technology available for converting capital and labor into output is summarized in the production function. Okay. So the production function is an engineering relation that defines the maximum amount of output that can be produced with a given set of inputs. So mathematically, the production function is denoted as Q equal to F, okay, by K and L. So Q is a quantity of output produced, K is capital input, L is labor input, F in functional form relating the input to output. Okay. So as a manager, your job is to use the available production function efficiently. So this means that you must determine how much of each input to use to produce output. In the short run, some factors of production are fixed. In the short run, some factors of production are fixed, and this limits your choices in making input decision. For example, takes several years of automakers to develop and build new assembly line for producing hybrids. So the level of capital is generally fixed in the short run. However, in the short run, automakers can adjust their use of input such as labor, uh, and steel. Such inputs are called variable factors of production. And the short run is defined as the time frame in which there are fixed factors of production. Okay. So to illustrate, suppose capital and labor are the only two input in production, and that the level of capital is fixed in the short run. So in this case, the only short run input decision is to made by a manager is how much labor to utilize. So the short run production function is essentially only a function of labor, since capital is fixed rather than a variable. Okay. So if we can see from this figure, this table, okay, table 5.551, okay, you can see column 1, 2 and 4 in table give values of the component of a short run production function, okay, where capital is fixed at K star, so equal to 2. So for this production function, 5 units of labor are needed to produce 1100 units of output. Okay, so given the available technology and the fixed level of capital, if the manager wishes to produce 1952 units of output, so 8 units of labor must be utilized. So in the short run, more labor is needed to produce more output because increasing capital is not possible. So the long run is defined as a horizon over which the manager can adjust all factors of production. So if it takes a company 3 years to acquire additional capital machines, the long run for its management is 3 years and the short run is less than 3 years. Okay. So So first of all, before we continue with this slide, okay, I think it's much better for us to continue to discuss, to add another slide. Uh, okay, before we continue with production function with algebraic forms, okay, we have to learn first about the measures of productivity. Measures of productivity. So let's measures of productivity. So an important component of managerial decision is the determination of productivity of input used in the production process. So how productive that input that we can use in production line. So as we will see, these measures are useful for evaluate the effectiveness of a production process and for making input decision. Okay. For what? For maximize our profit. So there are three most important measure of productivity: total product, average product, and marginal product. Okay. So okay, I will see this is a total product. Okay. Average product. Okay. Okay, this one maybe can help us to understand. Sorry. Our total product. So this hopefully can help us to really understand about this. So the total product is the maximum, the maximum. Okay, this is how that we in perspective of economics. Right, the total product is the maximum level of output that can be produced with a given amount of input. Okay. For example, the total product of the production process described in table 5.1. So let's see again 5.1. Okay, for example, okay. So when input 5 unit of labor are employed is 1100. Since the production function defines the maximum amount of output that can be produced with a given level of input, so this is the amount that would be produced if the 5 units of labor put forth maximal effort. Of course, if workers did not put forth maximal effort, output would be lower. So 5 workers who drink coffee all day cannot produce any output, at least given this production function. Okay. And then the second point in measures of productivities is average product. Average product is a measure of output produced, okay, per unit of input. Per unit of input. So in many instances, managerial decision makers are interested in the average productivity of an input. For example, a manager may wish to know on average how much each worker contributes to the total output of the firm. So this information is summarized in the economic concept of average product. So the average product of an input is defined as a total product divided by the by the quantity used of the input. Okay. In particular, the average product of average product of labor, okay, is quantity by labor. Okay, you can see, for example, of this. Okay, we can see an example. Is okay. So average product, okay, for every labor, for average product of labor, yeah, can see as equal to Q by L, quantity by labor, and the average product of capital, APK, is APK equal to Q by K. Okay, yeah, that's a concept. Thus average product is a measure of output produced per unit of input. So in table 5.1, can see again, okay, 5.1, for example, 5 workers can produce 1100 units of output. So this amount to 220 units of output per worker. You can just divide that. Okay, you can see. So that means the amount is to 220 units of output per workers. Okay. And then the third one, okay, that we use to measure the productivity, okay, okay, is marginal product. The marginal product, okay, the marginal product is the change in total output attributable to the last unit of input. Okay. So the change in total output attributable to the last unit of an input. Okay. Okay, you can see so the marginal product of input is a change in total output attributable to the last unit of an input. So the marginal product of capital, marginal product of capital, MPK, therefore is the change in total output divided by the change in capital. Okay, as you can see from this equation, so marginal product for K equal to change in quantity, change in the okay, change in the total output divided by the change in capital. Okay, the marginal product for product of capital, okay, equal to change of output by change in capital. And the marginal product of labor, marginal product of labor is the change in total output, change in total output, okay, divided by the change in total labor. Okay, so you can see change in divided by change L. So for example, in table 5.0 again, okay, table 5.0, sorry, 5.1, the second unit of labor increase output by 172 units. Okay, so the marginal product of the second unit of labor is 172. So the 5.0 illustrate an important characteristic of the marginal product of an input. Notice that as the unit of labor are increased from 0 to 5 in column 2, so the marginal product of labor increase in column 5. This help explain why assembly lines are used in so many production processes. So by using several workers, each performing potential different tasks, a manager can avoid inefficiencies associated with stopping one task and starting another. So, but not in table 5.0. After 5 unit of labor, the marginal product of each additional unit of labor declines and eventually becomes negative. So a negative marginal product means that the last input of the input actually reduce the total product. Yeah. So this is consistent with common sense. If a manager continue to expand the number of workers on the assembly line, he or she would eventually reach a point where workers will pack like sardines along the line, getting in one another's way and resulting in less output than before. So figure 5.1 shows graphically the relationship among total product, marginal product, and average product. So the first thing to notice about the curve is the total product increase and its slope gets steeper as we move from point A to point E along the total product curve. Okay, so we can see from this, okay, changes this figure. So this figure in figure 5.1 show graphically the relationship among total product, marginal product, and average product. So in figure 5.1 we see the marginal product reach its maximum point at point E, right? Okay, see that's the marginal product reach its maximum at point E, where 5 units of labor are employed, where 5 units of labor, okay, are employed. Okay, as the usage of labor increase from 5th through the 10th unit, so total output increases but at a decreasing rate, at a decreasing rate. See, so this is why marginal product declines. This is why marginal product declines between 5 and 10 units of labor, but is still positive. So the range over which marginal product is positive but declining is known as the range of decreasing, okay, or diminishing marginal returns, or diminishing marginal return to the variable input. So in figure 5.1, marginal product becomes negative when more than 5 units of labor are employed. After a point, using additional unit of input actually reduces total product, which is what it means for marginal product to be negative. So the range over which marginal product is negative is known as the range of negative marginal returns. Okay. So the principle here, principle that we have to remember, okay. Okay, the phases of marginal return as the usage of input. Yeah. Okay. So the principle that we have to remember here. Okay. As the usage of input increase, marginal product initially increases. So increasing marginal return, that means we will get more profit, then begin to decline, decreasing marginal return, and eventually become negative, negative. Okay, so negative marginal return. So for example, in studying for an exam, you have very likely experienced various phases of marginal returns. So the first few hours spent studying increase your grade much more than the last few hours. For example, suppose you will make a 0 if you do not study, but will make a 75 if you study 10 hours. The marginal product of the first 10 hours that is 75 point. So if it take 20 hours to study, to score 100 on the exam, so the marginal product of second 10 hours is only 25 point. Okay, thus the marginal improvement in your grade diminish as you spend additional hours at studying. So if you have either pull or an all-nighter and end up sleeping through an exam or performing poorly due to lack of sleep, you study in the range of negative marginal return. So clearly, neither student nor firms should ever employ resources in this range. Okay. So what are the role of managers in production process actually? Okay. So I think some of us maybe got some idea when we discuss from the from the started from the start that we also give get some idea the role of managers in production process. Okay. So the manager's role in guiding the production process actually described in twofold. The first one to ensure that the firms operates on the production function Okay, and the second one, to ensure that the firm uses the correct levels of input. So these two aspects ensure that the firm operates at the right point on the production function. So these two aspects of production efficiency are discussed, that we will discuss clearly after this. Okay, where we can see the first one, the produce, the production. The first, okay, we must make sure that as a manager, we must produce on the production function, on the production function. Don't let your input can give the impact until your production output can become negative. Okay, so the first managerial role is relatively simple to explain, but it is one of the most difficult for manager to perform. So the production function describe the maximum possible output that can be produced with a given input. For the case of labor, this means that workers must be putting forth maximal effort. So to ensure that workers are in fact working at full potential, the manager must institute an incentive structure. Okay, still remember, right, that we must know about the incentive concept. The previous, I think at the first our chapter. So an incentive structure that induce them to put forth the desired level of effort. For example, the manager of a restaurant must institute an incentive scheme that ensure that food served do a good job waiting on tables. So that one of the very important criteria for our servicing, our service in restaurant business. We must know how long that's customer supposed to wait for every menu. Okay, so most restaurant pay workers low wages but allow them to collect tips, so which effectively provide the workers with an incentive to perform well on the job. So more generally, many firms institutes profit sharing plan to provide workers with an incentive to produce on the production function. Okay, so we will discuss more further about this role in another chapter. Okay, and then the second role, that's in production. Okay, in production process, as a manager, we must clearly use the right level of input. As we discussed from previous slide, you can see if we put so many input, okay, it's become negative. So the second role of the manager is to ensure that the firm operates at the right point on the production function. For a manager, for a restaurant manager, for example, this means hiring the correct number of servers to see how this may be accomplished. So let us assume that output produced by a firm can be sold in the market at a price of $3. Okay. Furthermore, assume each unit of labor cost 400. So how many units of labor should the manager hire to maximize profit? Okay. To answer this question, we must first determine the benefit of hiring an additional worker. So each worker increases the firm's output by his or her marginal product, and this increase in output can be sold in the market at a price of $3. So that's the benefit to the firm from each unit of labor. Okay, is $3 times MPL. So this number is called the value marginal product of labor. Value marginal product of the labor. Okay. You see from here. So value marginal product of labor, and the value marginal product of an input thus is the value of the output produced by the last unit of that input. For example, if each unit of output can be sold at the price of P, so the value marginal product of labor, okay, is VMPL equal to P times MPL, and the value marginal product of capital is VMPK equal to P times MPK. Okay, so in our example, the cost of the firm of an additional unit of labor is 400. Okay, you can see from this table. Okay, you can see this example of table. So in table 5.2, okay, so as a table 5.2 shows, the first unit of labor generates, okay, $228. So VMPL equal to $228, and the VMPL of the second unit is 516. Uh, okay. So if the manager were took only at the first unit of labor and its corresponding VMPL, so no labor would be hired. However, careful inspection of the table shows that the second worker will add 116 in value above her or his cost. So if the first worker is not hired, the second will not be hired. In fact, each worker between the second and the ninth produce additional output whose value exceed the cost of hiring the workers. So it is profitable to hire unit of labor so long as the VMPL is greater than 400. Notice that the VMPL of the 10 unit of the labor is 228, which is less than the cost of the 10th unit of labor. So it would not pay for the firm to hire this unit of labor because the cost of hiring it would exceed the benefit. So the same is true for additional unit of labor. Thus, given the data in table 5.2, the manager should hire 9 workers to maximize the profit. So in this data, so our principle in this uh, discussion, okay, profit maximize. So to maximize the profit, so manager should use input at level at which the managerial benefit equals the marginal cost. More specifically, when the cost of each additional unit of labor is W, so the manager should continue to employ labor up to the point where VMPL equal to W. So in the range of diminishing marginal product. Okay. So the profit maximizing input usage rule define the demand for an input by profit maximizing firms. You can see from this figure. Okay, you can see from this figure. Let me take it out. Okay. So as you can see from figure 5.2, the demand for labor, the demand for labor, okay. So the profit maximizing input usage rule define the demand for an input by profit maximizing firm. For example, in figure 5.2, the value marginal product of labor is graphed as a function of the quantity of labor utilized. So when the wage rate is WO, the profit maximizing quantity of labor is that quantity such that VMPL equal to WO. W0 in the range of diminishing marginal return. So in the figure, we see the profit maximizing quantity of labor is L0 unit. So the downward sloping portion of VMPL curve defines demand for labor by a profit maximizing firms. It shows the relationship between the wage rate and the amount of labor a firm will want to hire at that rate. So we know the demand for an input slope downward because of the law of diminishing marginal return, which states that the marginal product of an additional unit of an input will at some point be lower than the marginal product of the previous unit. Okay. So since the marginal product of an input decline, as more of the input is used, okay, so the value of the marginal product also decline as more of the input is used. Okay, so since the demand of an input is the value marginal product of an input in the range of diminishing marginal returns, the demand for an input slopes downward. Okay. In effect, each additional unit of an input adds less profit than the previous unit. So profit maximizing firms thus are willing to pay less for each additional unit of an input. Okay, so this is the concepts where we as a manager must know, okay, in order for us to use the right level of input. Okay, now up until now we have relied on tables and graph to illustrate the concept underlying production. So underlying notion of a production function uh, can be expressed mathematically, and in fact it is possible to use a statistical technique like those discussed in chapter 3 to estimate a particular functional form for a production function. So in this section we highlight some more commonly encountered algebraic function of a production function. So we begin with the most simple production function, a linear function of the input. Okay, so we will discuss this in the next section of this chapter. Okay, until now, have a nice day, and we will continue with our next video to discuss of this concept. All right, thank you.